Hey guys, Will here. So today I wanted to introduce you to what has become my favorite piece of tech so far for 2023. So this is the Bigscreen VR Beyond Headset. And as you can see, it is absolutely tiny and incredibly lightweight, but that doesn't come with the sacrifices that you might be thinking you might have to make for a headset this tiny. So let's dive in now and I'll show you why I think this and products like this are gonna revolutionize VR experiences, particularly for those of us who are sim racers. Let's go. So as always, before we begin today, just a couple of important bits of information for you to be aware of for the full context of today's video. So firstly, big thank you to Bigscreen VR for sending across the Beyond headset for us to check out today. Now, this is a pre-production sample that they've sent me. They tell me that it is very close to final production. There may just be a couple of small tweaks to finishes, some firmware and software tweaks, things like that, but nothing major that's gonna impact the overall experience of using the headset over what you're seeing today. This is the upgraded version with the wider field of view, as we'll discuss a little bit later on today as well, just so that you guys are aware. So we will need to send this particular headset back. I'm hoping that they send us out a final production one once they release them so we can check them out and so that I can continue to use it as well. So as is always the case, nobody has any sort of editorial control over anything we're saying today. They don't get to see the video before you guys do. And everything that we're going to be talking about today is just purely my own experience, my own observations, and my own opinions of the product and the products that we're going to be comparing to. Now, if you do decide you want to pick up any of the headsets that we talk about in today's video, we do have some affiliate links down in the description below. Those are an awesome way of helping support our work here at Boosted Media at no additional cost to you if you find what we do of value to you. So we really do appreciate your support there. But let's jump in now and start off by talking about pricing and availability. So the Beyond headset is available for pre-order now. I'll put a link down in the description below to their website. It's going to be available and shipping to customers in the US from Q3 2023, they say, which is anytime from now onwards, basically. And then they're saying Q4 onwards for international customers. So pricing wise, if you're in the US, you're looking at about $999 US or $17.99 Australian dollars. Obviously, you'll need to factor in shipping depending on where you are in the world. Now, one other thing to be aware of just with regards to pricing as well as this is using outside-in tracking. So you will need to pick yourself up at least one Steam VR Lighthouse. Version 1 and version 2 of those lighthouses do work. For sim racing, I do actually find that 2 of them tends to work best. I kind of position one on either side of my screen. And just make sure you do shop around for the best prices on those Steam VR Lighthouses. Prices do seem to vary quite significantly on those, so just make sure you're getting the best possible deal. And then lastly, there is the option for an audio strap. Unfortunately, we don't have that here to show you. This is just the standard head strap, but that's going to cost you an extra $99 US if you're interested in that, but I can't comment on the quality of that. But I found that this was absolutely fine to use with any other headphones, either over ear, on ear, or in-ear headphones. Absolutely fine with this head strap, no interference whatsoever. So let's start off here by just quickly running you through the key specifications of this headset, and then we'll dive into the experience of actually using this guy over the last month and a half. I want to preface this by saying that I'm not a hardcore VR enthusiast. I'm not somebody that understands all the ins and outs and all the intricacies of every single setting that you have available in VR and all the different APIs and things like that that you can use to extract the best performance. I'm somebody that doesn't have a lot of time to be troubleshooting and messing around with things. I just want to be able to plug in, jump into my favorite game, enjoy it for as much time as I possibly can after the kids have gone to bed, and then go to bed and get some sleep myself. So that's the kind of perspective that I'm coming from here, just so that you guys are aware. So hardware wise, we've got, as you can see, an absolutely tiny little headset here, and it actually weighs in at 127 grams for just the headset without the strap. And then when you add in the face gasket, or the face cushion as they call it, and the head strap, it comes in at around about 170 to 185 grams. It will depend on the shape of your face, as you'll understand in just a moment. So the headset itself is 24 millimeters thick at the thinnest point just there, 143.1 millimeters long from side to side, and 52.4 millimeters from front to back. And again, that will depend on your face shape. So let's talk a little bit more now about the physical design before we get into the specifics on the optics and things like that. So as I touched on before, when you order one of these headsets, you're gonna get a custom created face gasket or face cushion, as they call it. And that is this guy here. And as you can see, it's all rubberized and it's actually 3D printed. And you can see it's got little magnets on the front here, which actually fix it to the headset like so. So when you order one of these, they're gonna send you a link to a website which actually opens an embedded app on your phone, and it uses the Face ID sensor to actually take a 3D scan of your face, measures your IPD or interpupillary distance, and all the features of your face curvature and all those things to essentially create what I guess you could refer to as a digital mold of your face, and then they 3D print this guy to match your face exactly. So you can see it actually fits on my face, around my eyes, absolutely perfectly. There's no light seepage or anything like that coming in. So it allows you to have that really tight and really perfect fit, I guess you could say, on your face. Now, they also account for your IPD in the physical design of the headset too. So the position of the LCD screens is actually physically fixed in position, and that is made for each individual customer. So there's a range there available between 55 millimeters to 72 millimeters IPD. If you fall outside that range, I guess that could create some issues with stereoscopic crossover, but talk to them about that if you do fall outside that range. So the upside of that, as we touched on, is the fact that it fits your face absolutely perfectly. It doesn't need to have any mechanical IPD adjustment or anything like that, which obviously reduces size and weight. The flip side on the negative is that this headset is customized to you personally. So unless you've got an identical twin that you want to share it with, you're probably going to be out of luck. And I did actually have a few people try the headset out here in the studio, and it didn't work for them at all. It was blurry and just out of proportion, and just wasn't a good experience overall. So do keep that in mind. It is a one-person experience, certainly not a headset that you're going to be using for social situations. Now, another thing you might be wondering about there is if it fits directly onto your face and creates that tight seal around your eyes, what happens if you wear glasses? So you can see here, there's actually some little magnetic lens inserts which they custom made for my particular prescription. And when you order one of these, you can give them your prescription and they can include these little lenses. I'm not actually 100% clear whether there's an additional cost for these or not. There wasn't anything listed on their website. It just says optional, but you can check that out and get in touch with them yourself if you do need prescription lenses. And that was absolutely fine. I did actually try with and without. I've got a pretty severe astigmatism in my right eye, and yeah, it was able to correct for it absolutely fine and look just as good as any other VR headset does if I'm wearing my glasses. So yeah, no issues there either. What I did find though is it does sit very, very close to my eyes. Now, most people that have used VR headsets would find that even just wearing it, you seem to end up with dirty smudge marks. You can probably actually see that on camera now from the last time I was wearing this on the lenses. I did find that I was having to clean the lenses on this more frequently than I do with other VR headsets. Just, I think it's my long bushy eyebrows that might be rubbing up against it and creating those grease marks on the lenses. So that was one little frustration that was more prevalent on this particular headset than some of the others that I've tested. But for any VR user, I think it's probably going to be something that you're pretty accustomed to, and you can just give it a quick wipe down with a clean microfiber towel. Don't use any alcohol or glass cleaner or lens cleaner, anything like that. That can damage the very fine coatings that are on these pancake lenses. But yeah, all those elements come together to create an absolutely fantastic experience. So just to finish up on the appearance and the physical design of the unit, there is a USB-C type connection on a 5-meter cable here, which is nice and floppy. It's not too rigid, and that goes back to this little control box here, and that's going to plug into your PC via DisplayPort and 2 USB type A connections. And the other side of that cable then plugs into the side of the headset just here. There's a little dot there that matches up with the dot on the plug to indicate which side you need to plug that into. On the other side of the headset, there's also another USB-C connection that allows you to plug in other USB accessories. So aftermarket headphones, you can even plug in a USB to 3.5mm stereo jack if you wanted to run any other headphones that you might be wanting to run. In my case, I just ran my headphones directly back to the PC, but if you do have headphones that require a cable, whether they're USB or stereo jack, it does mean that you can run it all through the one connection here and not have to have multiple cables tethering you back to the PC, which is particularly important if you're using games where you're going to be walking around a room, for example. So just keep that in mind too. And then we move on into the specifications of the optics themselves. Now, this was where I was actually really surprised, because on paper, it maybe doesn't quite stack up against some of the latest offerings from, say, the likes of Pimax with the Crystal headset, for example. But the actual experience of using the headset was absolutely fantastic, as we'll get onto in just a minute. So specs-wise here, you've got OLED displays, which give you absolutely insane contrast ratio. Pretty much an infinite contrast ratio here, because each individual pixel is emitting its own light, which means that you can have a completely black pixel right next to a 100% illuminated white pixel, and there's no crossover between the two of them other than just a little bit of distortion within the lenses themselves, as we'll talk about in just a minute. Now, on the subject of brightness, one question that's popped up quite a bit is the headset bright enough, or is it overall just too dim? Now, for me, I've got pretty sensitive eyes. I do struggle with really bright lights, which isn't easy in the studio here with the bright studio lights shining on my face all the time. Maybe that's got something to do with it. But I found this to be absolutely bright enough. I think what you've got to remember with a VR headset, particularly a VR headset that's creating that tight seal around your face so you're not getting any light seepage, your eyes are going to adjust to the dimmer light anyway. So for example, if you walk into a dark room, it's going to seem dark immediately, you know, as you walk in, but then after a couple of minutes, your eyes are going to adjust and you start to be able to see light just fine. So I didn't have any issues whatsoever with brightness with this headset. It isn't as bright as some of the other headsets that I've used, but often cases I do actually end up turning the brightness down on a lot of headsets anyway. So I don't think you're going to have a problem with brightness with this particular headset. Obviously your experience may vary there, but I just don't think that overall brightness is going to be an issue here for anybody. So resolution wise, we're looking at 5120 by 2560 resolution in total across the two 1-inch OLED displays, or 2560 by 2560 resolution per eye. That gives you a PPD of 32 pixels per degree, or 3500 pixels per inch. And you have a field of view with this headset of 102 degrees. Now, some of the earlier review samples and some of the other videos that you would have seen online already if you've been researching this headset were done with an earlier version of the headset, which was only a 90-degree field of view. The one I have here is the 102-degree field of view. And look, it is a little bit more restrictive than some of the other headsets that I've used in the past, and definitely noticeable if you compare it to something like a Pimax 8KX headset, for example. But what I found is that the sweet spot overall was large enough in the field of view that I could look around with my eyeballs without having to move my head around too much. And for sim racing specifically, I did find that it mimics the sensation of wearing a helmet quite accurately. Now, a field of view in a helmet is typically around more like 140 to 150 degrees or so, I'm told. I don't have any way of measuring it physically. So I wouldn't say that it's exactly the same as wearing a helmet, but what I can say is that you do kind of get used to just looking around with your eyes, moving your head around a little bit to see things like, you know, the edges of mirrors, cars alongside you, things like that. And yeah, look, I didn't have any problem at all driving with this headset. I didn't find that it was restricting my visibility to the extent that I was disadvantaged or anything like that. But obviously, again, you might be really sensitive. FOV might be something that's super important to you, in which case this might not be a headset that's appropriate for you. But again, you know, even though we are doing away with so many compromises with this headset, in my opinion, there are obviously always going to be some compromises. And, you know, when we've got such a small headset like this one, obviously you're just not going to be able to achieve the same kind of field of view as you can with something big and heavy like a Pimax 8KX, for example. So with a resolution of 5120 by 2560, that means you've got 13.1 million pixels across the length of two 1-inch OLED panels, which is just mind-bending. And according to their literature, that means that each individual pixel is only 7.2 micrometers wide, which is 7 times thinner than a human hair. So yeah, absolutely crazy tiny pixels. And the result of that, of course, in practical terms, is that there's absolutely no noticeable screen door effect with this headset whatsoever. Now, if you've watched any of my other VR headsets reviews, you'd know that I'm very sensitive to screen door effect. That's something that I always found was immersion breaking with older headsets that I tried. I actually held off on VR for quite some time because I knew that the experience wasn't going to be all that great for me. I knew that I was going to need that visual clarity to really be immersed in the VR world. And my first headset was actually a HP Reverb, and I did find that even though a lot of people said that screen door effect wasn't a problem with that headset, for me, I just found that it made me constantly aware that it wasn't real, and it just broke that immersion for me. But yeah, with this latest generations of headsets like the Varjo Aero, the Pimax Crystal, and now this guy as well, screen door effect for me, being very, very sensitive, is literally not an issue anymore. So if you're not familiar with what I mean by screen door effect, it's a sensation like you're actually looking through a fly screen or a screen door. So you get this kind of crosshatch effect, which is basically just the lines between the individual pixels. And obviously that's not something that you see in real life, so therefore it can be immersion breaking. So lastly, in terms of spec, let's just quickly touch on refresh rate too. So out of the box, this guy came with a refresh rate of 75 Hertz, which I actually found to be okay. For me, anything over about 75, 80 Hertz for VR tends to be okay. It's more the fluctuation in frame rate that tends to make me get motion sickness rather than a lower frame rate in general. But they just recently sent me a little utility which I was able to bump the refresh rate up to 90 Hertz on this. And I did notice I guess a significant change in the overall smoothness there. And they tell me that for the production versions of these headsets, that's actually going to be integrated into Steam VR. So you'll simply just be able to choose the refresh rate between 75 or 90 Hertz. So let's move on now, talk more about the overall user experience. So I already had Steam VR installed on all of the PCs that we use here in the studio from all the other headsets that I run from day to day. And yeah, literally I took this thing out of the box, I plugged it in, I fired up the PC, and immediately everything just worked straight away out of the box. I didn't have to install any drivers. I didn't have to do any configuration. I literally just jumped straight into a game, which after the experience that I had with the Pimax Crystal headset just a couple of weeks ago, and you can see that review, I'll put a link down in the description below for you, was extremely refreshing. Now, of course, the flip side to that again is that unlike what you have with Pimax or Vario, for example, there isn't so much configuration available. You can kind of think of this as more of a passive device. Really all it is just a couple of screens and just a tracking circuitry internally here, which is relying on the Steam VR lighthouses as we referred to earlier. So there's not a whole lot of processing actually taking place on the headset itself, unlike some of these other headsets that we've looked at. And again, because we don't have any mechanical IPD adjustment or anything like that, that is all very much simplified as well. So literally plugged it in, up and running immediately, got in to do some gaming. Now, the first thing that struck me was, as I was saying before, just the fact that there was absolutely no light leakage on this headset whatsoever. Now, I was able to achieve that with the Pimax Crystal headset with the larger face shield as well, but that tight seal with no light leakage made me appreciate the clarity in those LED displays absolutely immediately. And I've had absolutely no issues to speak of whatsoever with reliability here either. So I've been running this guy for well over 20 hours now on various different PCs with a 3080 Ti, a 3090 and a 4090 base system, and absolutely no issues with freezes or glitches or micro stuttering, anything like that. Everything has worked absolutely flawlessly. And as I touched on earlier, that's something that's extremely important to me as somebody that doesn't have a lot of time, just wants to jump in and play without having to troubleshoot and solve problems. Didn't have any issues at all with tracking or drifting or anything like that either. I do have two lighthouses set up in all the locations that I was testing this with though. There is a little bit of drift in some cases if you're using just one base station, and particularly if you've got a large reflective surface like a screen directly in front of where you're sitting, which is often the case on a sim rig, for example. You may find that you need to have that second lighthouse just to get that to work smoothly. But again, that will depend on the environment around you. Being outside in tracking, it does tend to be more reliable anyway than inside out, but reflective surfaces can still throw it off a little bit. So if you do experience that, chances are a second base station or second lighthouse will probably solve that problem for you, as it did for me. So yeah, the initial experience was quite frankly overwhelming because, you know, for something that's so small, I expected there to be some significant, I guess, compromises when it came to the visual quality. I just didn't expect it to be as good as it is. And look, honestly, other than just the more restricted field of view and a couple of other little visual issues, which we'll get into in just a minute, the experience was absolutely incredible overall. So that combined with the reliability just made it an absolute pleasure to drive with. And then there's the weight. We need to talk about the weight. So I've owned and tried a bunch of different headsets for sim racing in the past. I've had the Reverb G1, the G2, a Pimax 5K Super, a 8KX, the Vario Aero, and more recently the Pimax Crystal. I've never with any of those headsets been able to drive more than about 40 minutes or so without starting to feel fatigue. With the Pimax headsets in particular, the 5K Super and the 8KX, not so much the Crystal, I'd get that weight feeling on the bridge of my nose and it would just become uncomfortable, sweaty, and just generally not an enjoyable overall experience for anything longer than about 40-45 minutes. And I see people that do these crazy long sessions online and wonder how the hell they're able to do it. Obviously some people can, but for me that has always been an issue that I've had. I guess just overall a sense of immersion breaking claustrophobia, I guess would be the best way to describe it. But with this guy, I actually spent one night in particular driving in ACC, grinding away trying to improve my safety rating so I could do some online races. And I got to 3 hours into a driving session without even realizing, and kind of thought I better stop because I'm going to start to strain my eyes and I'm going to pay for it the next day. I do struggle with eye fatigue sometimes just in general. So yeah, it actually reached the point where I had to stop myself rather than the limitations of the headset stopping me, you know, prematurely, I guess. So that is something that I genuinely think is game changing, particularly for anybody who's playing VR games where you're moving around, bouncing around a lot, or, you know, for sim racing in particular, where you're making some really sudden jerking movements, you're flicking your head around a lot to see what's going on around you. Any big bulky headset does become uncomfortable over time, at least for me. And that absolutely wasn't an issue for me with this headset. Now, I would go as far as to say that I would be willing to make more sacrifice in terms of the visual quality with this headset just to gain that comfort over any of these other headsets. So even if this didn't look as good as it does, I probably still would make this my go-to headset for sim racing in particular, just because of those comfort levels, which I think really does say something. But in saying all that, it isn't absolutely perfect either. And a couple of things that I did notice immediately when I put the headset on was you do get quite a lot of internal reflection between the lenses and the screens themselves. Now, it's not really so much God rays, it's not shafts of light kind of beaming towards you in the headset. It's more just kind of like a bloom kind of effect, I guess you could describe it best as. So even though you have that really sharp contrast ratio at certain angles and looking around within the sweet spot, you do get that bloom around high contrast areas, which was something that was noticeably worse than the experience on the Vario or the Pimax Crystal for that matter. So I would say visually, the Pimax Crystal is still far and away the best visual experience I've ever had with a VR headset. The Vario Aero is very close, although there are some issues there with chromatic aberration. I actually need to experiment more with that. There's some software updates that have come out recently that supposedly kind of counteract that. But that was definitely one of the key drawbacks with this headset, and something that I really do hope that they can improve somehow before the final production. Obviously, we'll report back and let you guys know if that is the case, provided that they send us one to check out. I did try without the prescription lenses as well. I made absolutely sure that the lenses were clean just to eliminate those as possible causes. But yeah, I was never able to quite get away from that effect. The other thing I did struggle with a little bit here was because of the close proximity of the lenses to the display panels internally, the sweet spot in terms of positioning on your head is extremely sensitive as well. So it really does have to be in exactly the right spot, even a couple of millimeters up or down, and the visual experience just completely deteriorates. So you do need to have the strap done up quite tight. Obviously, with the custom molded face gasket, that does aid in keeping things relatively stable. But I did find in you know, more heated driving experiences where I was kind of moving around and shaking my head a lot, I did have to adjust it a couple of times just to make sure that I was maintaining that visual quality. That's something that I always find with VR headsets. Usually it's more due to the weight of them and it physically shifting on my head, whereas with this one it was more just because that sweet spot is so tiny, any little movement is going to throw it out. So that's just something else that is a bit of a compromise with this headset compared to some others that I've tested. But honestly, those were literally the only two compromises that I found with using this headset under the scenarios that I used it with. No issues at all with tracking with controllers. The quality of the microphones was absolutely fine as well. In fact, here's a sample right now of what the onboard audio sounds like. And yeah, overall the experience has just been absolutely fantastic, to the point where this will absolutely be my go-to headset for the next little while, at least until something better comes out. Yeah, it's just surprised me in so many ways. And as I said at the start of the video, this is easily my favorite piece of tech so far this year, just in terms of the innovation. And yeah, while by no means is it the absolutely perfect headset, it does have those compromises which may drive some people crazy, but it certainly comes with a lot less compromise than I was expecting for something that is so small, compact, and lightweight. So I know I'm quite often on the fence about these things, and I'm often kind of weighing up the pros and cons of different products and saying, well, if you like this, then you might like this one, but if you prefer this, then you might be more swayed towards this one and whatnot. But look, in the case of this headset, I would absolutely buy one. I would sell my other VR headsets to facilitate that. And yeah, I just think that this thing is absolutely fantastic. Obviously, it is still a pre-production unit. We don't know what the final experience is going to be like. I really do hope that they do fix those couple of little annoyances that I did have with this headset. And it may not be perfect for everybody in every single scenario. I think probably the major drawback with this headset is the fact that because it is custom molded to your particular face, it's not something that you're going to be able to share around or ever sell probably either. If you were going to upgrade from this, it's not going to really be of any value to anybody else because it's custom made to your face. So that is definitely an important consideration here as well. But yeah, look, honestly, I'm absolutely blown away by this thing, and yeah, I look forward to using it as often as I possibly can, and I think that's probably the biggest praise that I can give it. So I really hope that today's video has helped you out. If it has, please do leave a thumbs up. You can check out our reviews of other headsets linked down in the description below as well. And yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye.